Hey everyone, welcome back to Overshadowed. I've rebranded this YouTube channel from Riding in Cars to Overshadowed in order to reflect my decision to change the focus of what I do. Before, I was interested in looking at unknown stories that you might find as you drive along the highways and the roads of America, but now I want to focus exclusively on the field of research that I do, and that is Native history. I became interested in Native American history during my first graduate experience at the University of Dallas in Pine. However, uh, I'm graduating from Northeastern State University this coming Saturday, and I wanted to rebrand because I'm now fully vested and fully interested in the topic of Native history. I've been published in this field. I continue to do research. I present at conferences. This research culminated in a master's thesis that I'm very proud of and I hope to do more with. But I feel like I need to get the story out more about who the Tonkawa are before we get to that point where I'm publishing a book or doing something else with my thesis work. I deal a lot with very theoretical questions of history, so you'll get that. And like I said, you'll get a lot more on Native history as I do topics related to Native history. I also am working on a blog. I will leave a link to that blog in the comments section. I strongly encourage you to go and check that out. There I'll be posting more academic-ish stuff, but in the vein of other YouTube channels, I want to try and bring what I do academically into a public sphere, something that will get the attention of everybody and hopefully provide an avenue for you to learn something about history that's different from what you learned in high school or college or even graduate school. So before we get started, thank you again for coming out, and I hope to see you guys all again next time on Overshadowed. Don't forget to like or share, and if you want to be notified when I post, which will hopefully be more often, please make sure to hit that bell, and let's go and get started. In December 1890, a band of Lakota were massacred by the 7th U.S. Cavalry for refusing to obey an order to stop dancing the ghost dance. The Wounded Knee Massacre, while important to the study of Native history as a whole, can also be seen as indicative of a general trend within the history of focusing on narratives of resistance and the consequences wrought by that resistance, often violent resistance. I want to focus on smaller tribes like the Tonkawa, who were massacred by other indigenous peoples due to their alliance with the Confederacy. The Wounded Knee Massacre is a pivotal event in Native history. Still, when I learned about the Tonkawa Massacre at the hands of other indigenous groups, I became curious about why this event has not received the same level of attention as the Wounded Knee Massacre. I aim to explore what this disparity reveals about the relationship between smaller and larger tribes in the context of Native American history. Looking at this image, we find that at the bottom it reads, Great Chiefs of the American West. We see people like Sitting Bull, Geronimo, Quanah Parker, Chief Joseph, and Cochise. The question is, are these men really the great chiefs of the American West? And if so, what makes these men the great chiefs of the West? This image highlights a significant issue concerning the contrast between small tribes and large tribes. What does it mean to belong to a small tribe? What implications arise from being a tribe without a recorded history? We must acknowledge that much of Native history has been documented by those who predominantly focus on narratives of violence. Scholars who emphasize the military exploits of tribes that have engaged in acts of violence against the United States or other indigenous peoples are the same scholars who determine who are considered the icons of the American West and who we should recognize as the great heroes of indigenous people and of their race. However, when we only focus on histories of tribes that waged war against the United States, such as the Dene or the Lakota, we often overlook histories of those tribes that did not resort to violence. Consequently, we inadvertently erase the narratives of smaller tribes. In my research, I came across several myths that stemmed from the decision of the Tonkawa to ally with Anglo-Americans rather than to ally with other indigenous groups. This choice led to a resentment from neighboring Texas tribes, such as the Kiowa, the Comanche, and the Caddo, who banded together to punish the Tonkawa for what they perceived as a betrayal. Additionally, these tribes spread stories to the Spanish and later to the Americans, depicting the Tonkawa as cannibals. As we have seen in recent months, narratives about a group can play a powerful role in isolating them and making them outcasts. So what more can we learn about the Tonkawa? The Tonkawa massacre occurred on the morning of October 24, 1862, when an army of Shawnee, Caddo, Comanche, and others attacked an encampment of some 300 Tonkawa and slaughtered roughly half of them. In the aftermath of the Tonkawa massacre, the survivors spent the winter of 1862 at Fort Arbuckle in Chickasaw Territory. The following summer, they were removed to Texas, where it was hoped that they could play a role in the control of the Texas frontier. In 1867, Texas Governor James Throckmorton, a pro-Union Democrat, returned the Tonkawa to federal protection. The federal government sent them to the newly established Fort Griffin in Shackelford County, Texas, where the Tonkawa remained until the government removed them again in 1884 to Indian Territory. In 1885, the Tonkawa were placed on the Oakland Agency in Kay County, Oklahoma, where the Tonkawa continue to exist to this day. The earliest documented accounts of the massacre claim that the charge of cannibalism was a motivating factor for the army that ultimately decimated the Tonkawa tribe. These narratives suggest that the Tonkawa consumed an adult male. However, more recent interpretations, such as those presented in Mary Jane Ward's When the Wolf Came, argue that the victim was a child. This narrative is further complicated by the shifting tribal identification of the individual involved, which varies between Comanche, Caddo, in different retellings from the 19th century to the present day. Nonetheless, it's a disservice to reduce the Tonkawa to mere cannibals. Such claims about cannibalism provide an opportunity to deny the existence of the Tonkawa, a perspective that many Tonkawa scholars have propagated. In my research, I found that stories we tell about people and the histories of those same people are often completely different. I spent a great deal of my time addressing the question of authorship when it comes to those historians who perpetuate myth. In researching the Tonkawa, I had two questions I needed to answer. How can myths surrounding the Tonkawa be seen as reflective of the broader societal attitudes towards indigenous people? And what are the implications of storytelling in reshaping perceptions of cultural groups within both indigenous and non-indigenous communities? In conclusion, the exploration of the Tonkawa and their place in Native American history reveals the complexities surrounding the narratives of smaller tribes in contrast to more prominent counterparts. The Tonkawa massacre, much like the Wounded Knee massacre, underscores the violence and the fragility of indigenous existence in the historical context, yet it remains largely overshadowed by more widely recognized events. This discrepancy highlights a critical need to broaden our understanding of Native history beyond the narratives shaped by conflict and warfare. Ultimately, this investigation is not about just remembering the past. It's about reshaping future narratives of Indigenous people. Recognizing the history of tribes like the Tonkawa allows us to understand the full tapestry of Native experiences and honors their place in the American landscape. By valuing their stories of other tribes, regardless of size or military might, we take a step towards a more inclusive and accurate representation of Indigenous histories. Thank you everyone for joining me today. I hope you got a lot out of this presentation. I hope that you enjoyed learning a little bit about the Tonkawa. I look forward to sharing more of my research with you. And again, if you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe and to hit that button in order to get notifications for when I post future videos. Thank you.